My name is Norman Asher. I'm a native Atlantan, and my connection with Oakland Cemetery goes back only maybe 25 years, and that was based on a phone call I got from a cousin of mine, Alan Elsis, who asked me to join the foundation. And since then, I have really taken it upon myself to try to learn a lot more about the cemetery, about the history of Atlanta. My real interest is in the history of the city and of the Jewish families who founded the city and who helped make it grow. One of whom was my great-grandfather, Jacob Elsis, who founded and ran the Fulton Bag and Cotton Mill, which is located directly across the street from the cemetery. I really wasn't acquainted with the cemetery at all as a child growing up because the family really didn't want kids or young people from the family in the buildings. There was a lot going on over there. It was a very large manufacturing operation based right here next door to the cemetery. So we were really not welcome. I did go by there and occasionally went into the building with my uncle, Norman Elsis, who was running the business at the time. But that was not very often. So I didn't really know that part of Atlanta. And since then, however, it's been amazing to me how much I have learned. I think that the history of Atlanta resides right there on the grounds of Oakland. It is a tremendous history. It dates back, as we know, up and probably into the 1840s, and particularly during and after the Civil War. And my interest really is the history and the preservation of the grounds, the restoration of the grounds, and building a knowledge of what the people did who really are buried on those grounds, regardless of whether they happen to be Jewish or Christian, white or black, Confederate or Union soldiers. The combination makes for a very interesting history, I think, of the city. The early settlers that were Jewish happened to come from Germany, Austria, and Hungary in very large numbers in the 1830s, 1840s, and 1850s, and 1860s. They settled all over the country, but the ones that settled here in Georgia either came up from Savannah or they came here down from Cincinnati, by and large, or Cleveland. Those areas were where there were larger and older Jewish families than the ones that actually came here. Those families usually sent for or were contacted by their families in Europe and before they came, so that the European immigrants had someone to connect to when they got to America. That's how the Riches and the Elsises and other families happened to come to America, and I think it was typical of many of the Atlanta Jewish families. I worked for a Rich's department store for 35 years, from 1963 to 1998. And this was at a time when it was an independent company. It was a public corporation, but it was run by the family, and it did have stockholders as well. I was a merchant. I was a buyer in the home store, and it was a fascinating experience. At the time, we were just in the process, when I joined it, of creating the suburban store. And when I came to work, Lenox store was there, Lenox Square was there. And when I left, there was not only Lenox, but there were stores all over Atlanta by 1998. They were in Alabama, South Carolina, Augusta, Georgia. Just as I was leaving, well, actually a few years before, I was still there. The company, now under the leadership of the Federated Department Stores out of Cincinnati, Ohio, had expanded riches to not only to Tennessee and had us take over the goldsmith operation, but to Ohio, where we took over the Lazarus operation, and Pennsylvania. I think there were 75 stores by the time I retired in 1998, when there were really basically the two when I started in 1963, plus a very small store called at Belvedere Mall, Belvedere Plaza. Well, Oakland Cemetery is the burial spot for many of the earliest Jewish families who were really responsible, along with non-Jewish families, for making the city the important city that it is today. They were the builders, the movers and shakers of the 19th century. The names that come to mind, just a few of them, are the Rich family, the Elsis family, the Regenstein family, the Haas family, the Montag family, the Hirsch family, the Zaban family. There are many, many, many families that I haven't mentioned, but these are a few that are buried in Oakland, and for which there are many stories that can be told. These families really were important in politics, they were important in banking, they were important in insurance, in manufacturing, and they were movers and shakers in that they went and they built the city. The Haas family were active on city commissions that built the streetcar lines around Atlanta. The Elsis family, Jacob Elsis, who led the Fulton Bag and Cotton Mill, was the largest employer of people in Atlanta and of any business at the turn of the century. One of the families is the family of Dr. Joseph Jacobs, who was a pharmacist. He had a chain of pharmacies that became very prominent here in Atlanta. And one of his early pharmacies, he had a pharmacist working there by the name of Pemberton, who was very instrumental in the creation of the Coca-Cola that we know today. The first Coca-Cola was actually created and served at Jacobs Drug Store in downtown Atlanta. Dr. Jacobs himself, as that particular product became popular, at one time owned approximately 1/3 of the Coca-Cola company. Maybe it wasn't a company then, but of Coca-Cola. But he didn't think it was going to be as important as it really became. So he did sell his share, which would have been worth a little bit more than his pharmacies really could be today. At Oakland Cemetery, the Jewish sections are constructed a little bit differently than the non-Jewish sections. The oldest section, which was opened in 1860 by the Burial Society, is a traditional burial ground. The graves are all facing the same direction. One direction is toward Jerusalem, and the other is the opposite direction. So the eastern side of the grave is usually facing toward Jerusalem. The markings on the gravestones are mostly in Hebrew, but there is usually one side of the marker might be in English. These were the graves that were from the earliest Jewish residents of Atlanta. Through the joint efforts of the city and the foundation, I've seen just dramatic things happen. We've had contributions of $1 million and close to $1 million from major donors who have allowed us to restore and beautify certain areas of the 48 acres. so that they really look like a place that will become, in the future, one of the major tourist spots in Atlanta, with the burial site of Margaret Mitchell and Bobby Jones on site. We get visitors from around the world. And now I think one of my objectives is to build up the reputations of the Jewish sections where I see a connection. Even though the 48 acres is where my heart lies. I mean, my heart lies still in the whole thing. I really I feel like I can help more by raising an interest among the descendants of those buried there, and contributions that could be forthcoming for the restoration of the entire grounds.